Nick's going to be presenting on the Reablement approach into the new supported home program. Nick's had responsibility for that area as Assistant Secretary for the Supported Home Reform Branch now for a few years. Before that, he was known to many of us because he spent 2 years overseeing CHSP and aged care assessment. Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Paul. Can I just double check people can hear me okay?
Yes, we've got you loud and clear.
All right, great. Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. As Paul said, my name's Nick Morgan. I look after the supported home reform branch in the department, which is looking at the design of the new supported home program. And I mentioned these days when I talk to people that we've set up a new branch that's also now focused on the implementation and transition to the new program, and that's staffing up and planning's underway. And from the middle of the year, we should have a lot more communications around transitioning to the new program going out. So look, I guess as people know, Supported Home is intending to bring the aged care, existing in-home aged care programs together. So that's starting with home care packages and short-term restorative care from July 25, and then Commonwealth Home Support Program joining Supported Home no earlier than July 2027. And then alongside Supported Home, we're also establishing the single assessment system. And so, of course, today we have the regional assessment services and the ACATs, or aged care assessment teams, as well as the ANAC assessors, and we're moving to organisations that can assess for all aged care services. And, really the new arrangements do have an overarching objective of supporting people to remain independent in their homes for as long as possible, where that's their preference, which for most we believe it is. And then the best way really to do that is to support people when they first interact with the aged care system to be sort of active and socially connected and focused on how to achieve their own goals. And while these days, I typically try to avoid using the term reablement after being kind of belted about a bit when talking to consumers and using that term, given it's sort of not in the dictionary. But, in my mind, it's really about helping older people to defer that age-related decline. And in that respect, the ADL life curve is a concept that does make a lot of sense to me and to the department. I think the language that's used is around the compression of functional decline, but that's certainly in our thinking as we develop a new program. And so with that in mind, I think there are 3 areas to the reforms that I did want to touch on that will support reablement. Firstly, the new assessment arrangements, also the new assistive technology and home modification scheme, and then an expansion of short-term restorative care, or what we're calling the short-term restorative pathway under supported home. So if I start with assessment, I think we have an opportunity in establishing the single assessment system, and also as that progresses through to the implementation of supported home, to review the training and guidance materials for assessors who will be using the new assessment tool. And as part of that, we're looking at the lessons learned from a trial of, really reablement focused assessment that we ran a few years ago with the regional assessment services. And that involved quite intensive training in active assessment, where assessors were trained to do more observation of people in their homes and engaging with those people rather than, if you like, just sitting and asking questions, but also empowering assessors to conclude an assessment with, if you like, advice or reablement advice and some follow-up rather than just defaulting to the provision of ongoing services for, 90 odd or more % of clients. So I think what we found, the assessors who participated in that trial felt that around 30 odd % of clients they saw would really benefit from a period of reablement. The other thing that assessors participating in the trial typically did recommend with some level of assistive technology up front. And so I think for us, that assessment piece, and in particular, I'm not sure the extent to which the new IAT or the tool will itself have a sort of huge impact on reablement, but I think the training and the methodology that's employed by assessors is where I think it's going to be really important. The tool, in terms of the tool, once we get to support at home, we are still hoping to have some prompts that pop up in a tool so that where, some answers to the assessment instruments suggest a person might be a good candidate for the short-term restorative pathway in particular, there might be a prompt for the assessor saying, consider this could be a good, a good candidate. It's obviously still going to come down to judgments and in some ways attitude and the goals and that sort of thing that the person has, but the tool can play a part. But generally, I think it's around the assessment workforce. But in terms of assistive technology and home modifications, under support at home, we're setting up a separate ATHM scheme, assistive technology scheme. That's going to make equipment and modifications available upon assessment or after assessment, immediately after assessment, I guess, rather than today under the home care packages program, people have to, if you like, save their package funds for purchases, and that may mean foregoing services, and it also may mean long delays until they can afford a piece of equipment. And so under the new scheme, looking to avoid that, make access to equipment much more timely. It's also going to include, the intention is to include equipment loans, and we're currently establishing a trial with Enable New South Wales to use their loan scheme with aged care clients from hopefully July this year, where Enable New South Wales is in the process of setting up their systems and processes to be able to do that. And we also have been talking to other jurisdictions who are very interested in participating, and will be getting some of the lessons out of the trial with Enable New South Wales. The way from 2025, the way we're envisaging this working is that assessors would assign essentially a funding tier at assessment. And then in the lower tier, we'd expect they'd be things that can be accessed without prescription, so under advice. And where from 2025, supported home, people will have a single supported home provider, like in home care packages today, and the provider would be able to organise equipment for that person within that funding tier. The higher funding tiers we expect would be where we would require prescription, and we've got a service list being developed, or a draft service list being developed for us at the moment by Monash Uni, and within that, there's the advice that we're getting is a service list with the prescribing requirements against each individual item. So it's a very long list, and we'll be doing a bit of I think Monash will be doing some consultation in the coming, might be this month or next month, on that draft list. So the scheme, the intention is to have that prescribing cost also included in those sort of funding tiers. So yeah, as I say, next step is to consult on that list, continue with the trial, and flesh out the further details of how that the ATHM scheme will operate over the next few months ahead of from mid-year again, increasing our communication on this is how it will work, rather than testing our thoughts on how it will work. And then the third area is that short-term restorative pathway that will essentially replace the short-term restorative care program. So the intention there is that rather than the 8 weeks people can access under STRC, based on our consultations, we're looking to increase that to 12 weeks from 8. I think we're still going to land with places for that program, rather than we were looking at some other ideas, but a number of places that are funded, higher number of places, I think, than are funded under STRC. We would maintain the idea of a multidisciplinary team and some form of, I think they're calling them a restorative care partner, but a kind of coordinator clinical coordinator to support people going through that short-term restorative process. And then the other thing on the back of the consultation we've done is to make sure we have an ability to have a sort of tail of ongoing support. So it might be group exercise classes that a person can access post the short-term restorative care 12-week program. Another point that's kind of probably worth raising is in our discussions around who might be who could benefit from the restorative pathway and who would get referred is not being too narrow about that. So, where someone, I think an example was raised when we were talking to allied health professionals around a person who has communication difficulties, needs a speech pathologist and a program of support in communicating using different supports, and that could be a really good option for to be included in the short-term restorative pathway. So it's not just that kind of mobility type support that people might need on that kind of program. So look, I think overall, all of that together, where we think we'll give a much greater focus on that idea of sort of more upfront support, preventive support, if you like, to help people stay independent, under supported home. And we'll be working through the details over the next few months ahead of hopefully from mid-year being able to come out with more detail and more certainty around these arrangements as we get the government decisions we need as well.
First one, what will Reablement look like in regards to the single assessment service between now and the commencement of supported home program?
So I think that we will. I'm not 100% sure, I suppose, is the answer. I think we are needing to still work through the training modules and so on for single assessment. So there's still an opportunity to review there are reablement training modules for assessors. There is still, I think, a view around utilizing active assessment. The extent to which that is, the extent to which we have the opportunity to redevelop some of that material ahead of, the focus at the moment being around getting the workforce established, I'm not sure, but I think we will need to make changes, including to the IAT for supported home when the classifications and so on come into play. And so I guess I'm in my mind thinking that's where there's more of an opportunity to make bigger changes.
Yeah. And a follow on from that, from Melissa, was the short-term restorative pathway. Will it focus only on the rehabilitative type services such as assistive technology, allied health aids and equipment, or will it also allow short-term goals but more social or community-based goals?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it came up in our discussion with the particularly with the allied health group, allied health. What do they call it? Allied Health Services Australia, I think, put together a group for us, so we discussed some of this with, and the more I kind of said, well, if we had to prioritize who would access this, which people would it be? The more the discussion went, well, these people could benefit, and that social side could play, and we could have this. So I think like the reality is we'll probably need to do some prioritization. I referenced the supporting someone with communication difficulties through speech pathology and other things to build up using different communication devices and so on to kind of at least signal that we're not trying to be too narrow about it. The extent to which it picks up the social supports, the social support side, yeah, I'm just not sure because I think it could potentially open up. It could open up to a heck of a lot more people, and we'd need to think about how that's contained, I suppose. Before someone's
I
put
think those were the main questions that people have posted. So
Okay.
thanks very much, Nick.